What's up, assholes? Welcome back.
Hi.
We are joined here with Cracker, Matt.
Yes, I am the Cracker. I am the saltine.
Yes. And we're both here to tell you how third wave feminism is a bad habit.
Before going further, we should probably clarify how you define the difference between second and third wave, which,
True.
For me, at least the subjective term is that second wave was more of, well, there was an abortion issue. First wave is more, I mean, this is very, very much simplifying it.
Right.
But first wave is more voting rights. Second
Suffrage,
wave,
yeah.
more voting. Second wave, more abortion issues and birth control issues.
Yeah.
Third wave is where we start getting into slut walks, etc. And then,
Identity politics.
well, and then there's also argument that we're in the fourth wave as well, but that's up for debate. We'll see how future history books clarify that.
Right.
So I would say, yeah, if the idea becomes that you're fighting for a cause but don't have one specific outcome in mind, it begins to turn into fervor rather than a mission.
Right. Okay, so we need to establish when that healthy routine becomes a bad habit, right? That question is both super difficult and really easy when you actually take a step back and observe yourself. When you make a mistake, what do? Do you take responsibility and vow to never make that same mistake? Or do you look for outside sources that could have caused this problem? Because if the latter sounds like you, then you may have developed a bad habit.
Well, I think then there's also the line between stoicism and, well, stoicism being that you just stay in your position, letting people walk all over you, and not point out when something bad is happening to you. So there seems to be a difference between rejecting stoicism and going all the way for activism. And there's that middle ground of going, I'm going to do nothing. Well, there's someone going, I'm going to do nothing.
Right.
Someone going, I'm going to do something, no matter what it is.
Right.
And then there's the middle ground where someone is calculating how to get out of an issue.
There's that balance, yeah. So, we're not here to give you 12 rules for life. That's not why we're here. We're here to tell you that third wave feminism is a bad habit. And if we feed this habit, it could mean essentially the end of our Western culture.
So when you say Western culture, what for you is the defining factor between Western culture, and by that I assume the entire Western hemisphere, compared to Eastern culture or any other that you can think of?
I'm talking about specifically America as we see it now.
Okay.
Current president, politics, all that stuff. So it's really just our little niche of Western.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, so what does all that have to do with third wave feminism and toxic masculinity, which I just mentioned now? I think that radical third wave feminists have developed the bad habit of blaming men for their shortcomings. And the way I want to show that to you is by giving you a few quotes from these so-called feminists. Robin Morgan, who at least used to be an editor for Ms. Magazine from 1990 to 93, she said, "I feel that man-hating is an honorable and viable political act, that the oppressed have a right to class hatred against the class that is oppressing them."
I wasn't aware that men were a class. I thought men were a demographic.
Right. That would be my thought.
I was going to say, you could have plenty of lower class women and lower class men.
Absolutely.
Or however you identify. And then you could also have people who up in the higher rungs as well. So when we talk about classes, are we talking about political class? Are we talking about monetary? Or it seems like they're just going, a trait makes you a class.
That's exactly what they're doing, and it drives me nuts. So this person, Sheila Cronin, who is the leader of the feminist organization Now, has said, "Since marriage constitutes slavery for women, it is clear that the women's movement must concentrate on attacking this institution. Freedom for women cannot be won without the abolition of marriage."
Well, and I think that's where you start getting a lot of the Fox News reactions, even, where it's just like, oh, feminism is about destroying marriage, but then you get some people who will listen to certain arguments and go, oh, it means equality. And then there are some who will go, oh, it means that it's an attack on the institution of marriage, and some people really take that personally.
Yep.
It seems like there is no standard definition for feminism because it has had so many iterations, and even during those iterations, it's been very fractured.
Yeah.
And so when someone chooses to choose a label that's so broad to proudly identify themselves with little context, it does become a very bizarre social situation.
Yeah, it's almost like feminism means something specifically to them, but they're not telling people what it means to them, so they're just thinking that you're going to get it.
Well, because it's not their job to educate you.
Exactly. Even Sharon Stone has said, the more famous and powerful I get, the more power I have to hurt men.
It's a tough one to contextualize, yeah.
Yeah. So my opinion is that these women are so focused on punishing men for this perceived oppression that they've lost sight of their actual goal, which used to be equality, and now it's equity. But what I'd like to do is break down the quotes for you. So, Robin Morgan says it's a good idea to hate men. Why? She's the editor of a large magazine. Why should she need to blame men for anything that has happened to her? I think what it is that she's scared to look at herself. She's afraid that by stepping back and being truthful, she won't like what she sees. And I think a lot of women feel this way, and they let it develop into a bad habit, basically. So, Sheila Cronin thinks marriage is slavery for women. And it's not for me. So that's basically like your point is gone now. Because you say it's slavery for all women, but it's not for me. So that's it. That's it. And I think abusive relationships are kind of like slavery.
Well, it's a domination scenario.
But the only person in that situation that can save you is you. And I think what happened is that maybe she was stuck in a violent relationship and she didn't know how to escape. And maybe she's still in it or afraid it's going to happen again. And she's using it as an excuse to act poorly and blaming other people for her own stuff.
There are even situations where, let's say, it's not a violent one,
right?
But where someone just feels like they don't have the guts to confront someone or end whatever they're in, even if it's a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, yeah, there are plenty of people who look back and go, wow, I stayed in that way too long.
Right. But what she needs to do is stand up and fight with the men who share her moral values. So, the only thing I have to say to Sharon Stone is, who hurt you? Seriously. This is probably like the weirdest habit I've seen, because she's a super powerful woman. Why does she need to hold that power over men to hurt them? It's like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
In the general celebrity scenario, that you have to deal with a lot of powerful people.
True.
And then if you don't perform certain things, it makes it very tough to continue in the industry. And I think that there are plenty of times in film, especially where labor laws aren't properly enforced, that things happen in that industry and people inside it think it's representative of the entire country.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we're all just assuming everything about everyone so that we can get mad. That's the only reason we're doing it. She's instead just going, well, I'm going to hurt all men.
Not very productive.
No, not healthy.
I don't imagine she's had much success at it either.
Moving on. I think these bad habits are sort of permeating our culture at a really rapid pace. And there's been an increase in women-only activities that I think has kind of stirred a lot of that up. For instance, there was a lawyer whose mother died of breast cancer, and he was denied a hat at a race because he was male. So they were giving hats to all the females, but when he came up and said, hey, I want to support this because my mom died of breast cancer, they were like, no, you can't have one because you're male.
And I think that is reminiscent of if I want to say it, that whole bakery case.
Yes.
Where the difference with that case seems to be that it's a sole proprietor.
Right.
And that one person wasn't going to make a custom product for anyone. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a boundary of civility or going back and forth, there's a little bit of battle with them. Mm-hmm. And so to completely refuse sale of a product, definitely a lawsuit where he has a case. And
he did sue. And he did win. So there you go. And just recently, that Statement Festival in Sweden was canceled after the founders were found guilty of discrimination. So one thing about that I don't think a lot of people know is that the Statement Festival actually had a man pen behind the stage where all the men had to go and stay while the women did their thing.
That sounds like a very dangerous scenario in and of itself. It's like, let's just segregate everybody, put all the women here, put all the men here, and maybe at some point they won't fight throughout the show.
Oh, my
I don't know
goodness.
why any... Yeah, that was a very strange...
But a girls' empowerment retreat for female firefighters was also scrubbed after a civil rights lawyer complained.
You think about typical workplace activities and the fact that it shouldn't be... Well, in a lot of cases, you could actually sue if you start to go, well, they were bringing only the men out for this. This presents opportunities for the men. Or you could say they were bringing only women out for this, and this creates a clique.
Right.
And potentially something could happen there as well.
Right.
And so in the concept of unity, it makes a good idea not to have separate retreats where people can assume the worst of each other.
So, that being said, in a perfect world, these women would stop assuming the motivations of men they've never met, and men and women could work together in complete harmony. But by excluding men from these activities, these women believe it makes them more powerful somehow, and I just really don't think so, because in reality, it pushes men farther away. It pushes them into a corner where they have to cower and beg to get along with women, and I just think that's really just... It's putting men down. And by projecting their views of men upon this patriarchy that they've created, they're setting themselves up for failure. Things like distrust, hate, paranoia, and anger, they're all negative emotions which form bad habits, and I think that's, exactly what's happening.
It's treating some people like infants.
Mm-hmm.
Well, treating themselves like infants as well.
Yes.
But the problem with that is that a lot of the issues women face are also downhill from the problems that men face. By that, I mean, men are most vulnerable until they're 15, 16 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you start seeing there's a whole bunch of physical and sexual assault against males,
right.
Especially before the age of 15.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then once that flips, women, I think, suddenly go into, oh my God, I've lost all this power. And then men feel like they've gained all this power. But it's a perspective difference, because men have gone from being weak their entire lives to gaining some strength. And then women have to go through a period of weakness later in life. And
it's like they can't handle it or something.
It's something where you just don't see it coming. And
it's interesting.
But what happens is, if you have a whole bunch of guys who were raised poorly and they aren't protected, or their issues, or they don't have people to go talk to or report privately if something happens to them, what that inherently does is create a whole generation of bad husbands that these women are going to have to deal with.
Yep.
So when people talk about, oh, we need to fix women's issues first, it's, no, we should really have it open for everybody, because there's a cycle that's going on. And if we only try to stop one portion of it, it's just going to swing back and keep going.
Exactly. And that kind of brings me to my last point, which is that masculinity and femininity are not inherently toxic. But there's a lot of women who are becoming mad at their shortcomings, and just instead of working on themselves, they just blame all men for their problems. So, and I think that actually your point was very good in that, is that they just don't really know what to do at this point. So we'll leave you with this one last reminder. Don't confuse anger and passion. Okay, bye!
Bye-bye.